Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. This is a podcast about improving your life with creativity. Basically, taking the assumption that the creative process is a vehicle for allowing you to allow your real self to emerge so you can have a better relationship with yourself and then a better relationship with life by extension. If you don't know, I am a performance coach. I help people to kind of basically improve their lives and their businesses by helping them to make them more real, more authentic, more genuine. My name is Ollie Anderson, if you didn't know that. Every episode of this podcast, Creative Status, is an interview, and today is no different. We are listening to an interview between me and a guy called Martin Salama. He's another life coach, and he has a methodology, basically, that he uses to help people become more aligned with themselves, more aware of themselves, and to have a better attitude that will get them the results that they want. The main focus of this interview is the law of attraction, and a lot of the misconceptions and bullshit, basically, that's out there. There's a lot of marketing gimmicks and nonsense, and people trying to sell the dream to people who are maybe desperate and have reached the end of their tether, but don't realize that actually the law of attraction is a very simple thing. It's just about aligning yourself with reality, keeping the faith, living in the end, and moving forward and taking inspired action and the obvious next steps to where you need to be. And all of those things will always reveal themselves if they let them. Personally, in my own life, I was quite cynical about the law of attraction for a long time. It seemed too good to be true. And also, I suppose I'd bought into, or I was resisting, a lot of the panacea type solutions that are sold out there around the law of attraction. But when I look back in my life, I realized every so often I would get so desperate that I had no choice but to basically use the law of attraction. And that's when things would actually start working out. So then I started taking a more conscious approach to doing this, trying to do it in a real way, which for me is just about moving towards wholeness, not letting my ego get in the way. And I realized that there's a process I'm always talking about, awareness, acceptance, and action. It actually aligns with the process that you need to go through in order to be able to use the law of attraction effectively. So awareness for me is really just deconstructing your ego, stepping back from the identity you might have picked up, the points of view you picked up that are blocking reality and not aligning you in the way that you need to be aligned. The next step is acceptance, which just means accepting yourself unconditionally, but you can only do that if you integrate the shadow side of yourself that has been hidden beneath the ego, the mask that you are wearing. And then finally is action, or in the case of the law of attraction, manifesting and making things happen. If you skip straight to the action stage without doing the inner work, then you're just going to end up worrying all the time. You're going to be stressed. Your inner state is not going to be conducive to getting where you want to be. And so you need the awareness and the acceptance, the ego deconstruction and the integration of shadow before you can start doing all this stuff. So anyway, that's just my little rumination about that. The interview itself is really insightful if you're into this kind of thing. We take a very kind of logical approach to just breaking down some of the misconceptions, seeing where people might be holding themselves back, seeing where maybe people are expecting too much, which is always an ego thing. They're just forcing things, and you don't want to force anything if you're living in this way that we're talking about. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking because this is a long intro. But Martin, thank you so much for coming on here and being interviewed about this stuff. Everybody else, I hope you really enjoy listening, and I'll see you again next Monday for another episode of Creative Status. All right, peace. Well, hi there, Martin. Thank you for joining me today on Creative Status. Previously, when we've spoken, we got quite detailed about exploring the law of attraction. I think that's what we're mainly going to be focusing on today. But before we start diving into all that and picking it to pieces, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people, what you do, what you stand for, and how you ended up where you are right now, doing the things that you're doing?
Well, hi, Ollie. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you today. So I'm known as the architect of the Warrior's Life Code, and life for me stands for live incredibly full every day. And I'd like to say that I was like that my whole life, but that's not true. And it goes back to when I was a child and I had a traumatic event happen to me, a tragedy at a young age. When I was 10 years old, I was the one of six. I had 4 older sisters, and a younger brother who was 5 years younger than me. His name was Michael. And when I was 10 years old, he was killed in a school bus accident.
Wow.
And it was the most tragic day in my life. And till this day, it's still been the most tragic day. As it was for my family, my mom, my dad, we were distraught. And as a 10-year-old, I told myself that it's my job now to carry on the legacy of the name. I'm the only one left with the Salama name.
Wow.
And that it's my job. So at that moment, I can look back now, basically almost 50 years ago, I just turned 60, that at that moment, I became a people pleaser. And with that came a lot of other things as well. It's bad enough being a people pleaser, but also I took things personally. I was a control freak and I had a very short temper. So, and that's the way I was for the next 40 years. I didn't always blow up. I wasn't always an angry person or stuff like that, but it was my job. I felt like when I was in a situation where I was trying to make everybody happy, that it was for me to do. And I would rationalize that it's, if it's against what I was believing or something, that it was okay because it was for the greater good. And 40 years later, I looked back then, that 10 years ago, and I realized that rationalize was not a good thing to be doing. And I came up with this idea that, and I've trademarked it, that rationalize is really two words: rational lies. That you lie to yourself that it's rational to do things, even though deep down inside it goes against what you're feeling. Maybe it's your ego, maybe you're trying to please others, which I was trying to do all the time. So, and I was like that for the next 40 years with this whole idea of being a people pleaser.
Wow.
And it took me 50 until I was around 50 to finally realize I was a people pleaser, pleasing no one. And that was not good. Could you get where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah. So you ultimately spent your whole life kind of hiding from yourself behind this kind of this learned pattern of people pleasing. And ironically, it wasn't pleasing you. It wasn't pleasing other people, like you just said, because people don't actually have any respect for people pleasers, and it's never real. So you can't really develop authentic relationships and stuff like that. So how did you wake up? Like, what happened to kind of snap you out of that learned pattern of people pleasing?
So let's move forward to about almost 40 years later. It was about 35 to 40 years, about 35 years later. It was 2008, and my wife and I were working on a project for 5 years to build a multi-million-dollar tennis club and health center in New Jersey by what's known as the Jersey Shore.
Wow.
And it took us 5 years to get all of the approvals from the city, from the state, get everything done, find the location, everything that you need to do from start to finish. Finally, in the summer of 2008, we got the last things we needed, the approvals from the city and the state. And we go to the banks, we're like, okay, great. You've been lending money like crazy the last few years. You told us to come back when we're ready. We're ready. They go, well, we're not lending right now. Things aren't what they used to be. I said, but I put in $3.5 million already. Wow. Well, sorry, can't help you. A month later, September 2008, the financial world falls apart. Thanks to Bernie Madoff and the subprime loan. And we all know what happened there. A lot of people lost a lot of money. I was one of them. Overnight, I was wiped out financially to the point that I stopped paying my mortgage. I stopped paying my car payments and all that. And one day my son says, Dad, the car is being towed away. I was being repossessed. And soon after that, the house was foreclosed on in New Jersey. It took a little while for us to lose the house, but we still lost the house eventually. Wow. That's where I was in my life. It was a terrible time. And it took me about a year to get off pick myself off the floor from that in the depression I was in and say, okay, what am I going to do now? Wow. And I looked around, I thought about it, decided I didn't want to be a businessman anymore. It was just too volatile for me my whole life. So I looked around and I realized I was most happy when I was helping people in community organizations. I was always a leader. I was always that guy who said people would come and say, well, I can't do much. I can help. I go, come in and help. I'll show you. And I show them their potential as how what they're doing so little means so much. And I realized what I was doing was I was a life coach. without even realizing that that's what I was doing. So I decided I'm going to start pursuing the idea of going to life coach training.
Wow.
As I was about to go there, a couple of months before, it was my 24th wedding anniversary. And my wife said to me, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my God, I can't catch a break. And I kind of knew it was coming, but until it actually happened, you never believe it. And all of those people pleaser, those taking things personally, those lack of self-esteem, self-worth, all came bubbling to the surface. I was like, what am I going to do now? I decided I'm still going to go forward with the life coaching. And I think God was, just tugging on my shoulder a little bit saying, hey, buddy, there's a lot of stuff going wrong here. Maybe you got to look at yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And that first week in coach training, they said, you don't have to live with who you think you are. You can change. I was like, really? I can? And that's when I started to understand that I wasn't happy with who I was because of the things like being a people pleaser, which then led to the other things.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite an amazing story. So ultimately, you went from having it all, which you managed to attain ultimately, like you're talking about your tennis club and everything. You got all that stuff despite the people pleaser tendencies holding you back. But in a way, all of that was kind of, it was just a house of cards. It was unreal because the people pleaser version of you wasn't actually built on a solid foundation. It's just something that your ego created so that you could kind of survive, whatever it was that you'd been through in the past. So all the stuff you said about, your brother unfortunately passing away and that kind of thing. And so when everything was taken away, when the rug was swept from underneath your feet, I'm throwing out a lot of metaphors here. But anyway, when the rug was swept from underneath your feet, you were just left with you versus yourself, basically, right? You hit rock bottom. So your money was gone by the sound of it. Your wife left you, and it was just you and life itself, I suppose. And in that moment, that's when you had something true finally creep in to show you like the actual truth about yourself and who you could be if you wanted to be. That sounds very dramatic, maybe, but is that
so true? It's Ali, you hit it that your head on the nose, right there on the head, the nail on the head, as it were. What happened was when I was going into coach training, they handed us a list of books. They said, read a few of these books before you start. It'll help you prepare. And one of them was a book by a gentleman named Don Miguel Ruiz. It was called The Four Agreement. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never read it. It's come up a lot, though, like a lot.
Well, for me, that book was a life changer. Wow. Specifically, the second agreement, which is don't take anything personally. And at that moment, when I read that, I was like, what? You mean I don't have to have the world on my shoulders? It's not all up to me? And it was like somebody had told me a secret that I had known my entire life. People have been telling me my entire life, but until that moment, I wasn't ready to hear it. Because you know what? When the student is ready, the master will appear.
Yep. Yeah. Do you think... So earlier at the start of the conversation, you said, so after your brother passed away, you kind of created this mission for yourself that you had to kind of carry on the family name and that, you were basically going to leave a legacy around that name, something like that. So do you think that your attachment to that mission caused a lot of these problems that you're talking about, the people pleasing and trying to get certain results, etc., and actually the attachment to that kind of made it harder to actually achieve that. And so now that you've been through this process that you're talking about of kind of not taking things personally and loosening up, you're more likely to achieve that in the way that you want to.
Yes, absolutely. No question it did. To the point that even when I was thinking I was succeeding, I was afraid I wasn't succeeding enough. So the fear of failure and the fear of success was always there.
Yeah, because you were putting so much pressure on yourself you were invested in the outcome, basically. And now you've stepped away from outcomes, you're outcome independent, which just means that your self-worth, your feelings about yourself are not affected by what's going on. That means you can go out there, do your best and forget the rest. And by doing that and having this attitude that you're now talking about, you're more likely to be happier, obviously, but also to get the results that you want anyway, because you're not adding that unnecessary mental friction and stress that kind of distorts our vision of life anyway.
Exactly. And while I was starting this journey, one of the things I said to myself was, I'm going to take care of myself. As long as I'm not hurting somebody else in the process, I come first. It's like that saying when you're on the airplane and they tell you put the mask on you first before you put it on to people around you.
It's the whole thing, isn't it? You can't pour from an empty cup. So you need to,
exactly.
You fill yourself first, then you've got more to offer the world, more to give other people. So you've described this process that you've been through. So ultimately, you in your youth, you picked up a certain idea of who you were supposed to be. You became very attached to that, and actually, it kind of left you with a sort of void, which a lot of people have because of these kind of patterns that we all have to some extent. You eventually hit rock bottom. At rock bottom, you actually found yourself, and you were able to rebuild your life by the sound of it in a way that you're very happy with now. You're very satisfied with yourself. You've got a better relationship with who you are and your emotional stuff and all that kind of thing. So where does the law of attraction come into your, I suppose, rise back to the top, if we want to phrase it like that? So how did the law of attraction help you?
First thing is, I want to make it clear to everybody in the audience, you don't have to wait until you hit rock bottom to look at yourself and say, I need to change.
Yeah.
For me, it happened that way, but it's not that way for everybody. It's just, are you happy where you are in your life? And if not, it's okay to question why. And it's okay to go further. So I just want to clarify that before I go further. So I had heard of the law of attraction in, the mid 2007, 2008, like that. And I thought I understood what it was about. You ask the universe what you want and all the things around you will start happening in that way. And looking back now, one of the things I was saying during those few years was, I don't want to get divorced. So what the universe was hearing was divorce, which is what ended up happening. Maybe if I would have said, I want to stay married and do the work towards that, who knows? But looking back now, knowing who I am now and unwrapping, unmasking myself and learning about myself, it was when my wife asked me for the divorce, I can look back now and say, other than our 4 children, it was the greatest gift she ever gave me. Because it gave me the ability to look within myself and say, okay, what do I need to change? And it's not about changing for her or for the children or for anybody else. Who do I need to become so that I can be happy with myself? And going through coaching, I realized we were in a codependent relationship for 25 years. We were both the victims and the culprits of the fall of the marriage. That make sense?
Yeah, 100%. So the law... Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so I was just going to say, what you're saying about the law of attraction there then is, in relation to your marriage, like you were focusing on what you don't want, but actually the law of attraction is just focusing on what you're thinking, isn't it? That's how it seems to work. So if you're just thinking, I don't want to get divorced, well, your focus on that is actually going to cause you to act in a way that sort of manifests that to happen.
Right, but I believe that's just the foundation. The law of attraction is just a foundation, and there's more to it. I wasn't doing the work to make sure that my marriage wouldn't survive. Even though we thought we were, maybe we both weren't doing the work, and there's 2 people involved there, so that's another thing. But it definitely didn't help. Okay, so now, as I was going through coaching and I started to understand and become more self-aware, I switched myself from being self-conscious to self-aware. And there's a big difference between the two. Self-conscious is a state of guilt. It's an outward thing where you're trying to, prove yourself to others. You're trying to, prove your ego and all that. Whereas self-aware is all within yourself. It's a positive state of mind, and it has to have like a emotion within yourself that everything is okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So as I was doing this, I started reading books and understanding that it's about me continuing to learn and continuing to grow. And I worked with somebody on this, and she gave me a lot of the ideas in her books, and I actually got to work with her. Her name is Genevieve Davis, and it's really a lot around her, and then I've expanded it in my own way as well. So she says, and this is where my cycle of A comes in, and I'm going to put it in my way now. So for me, the cycle of A's is 3 letter A's. The first one is ask. ask the universe for what you want. Just like I was saying, I don't want a divorce. The universe heard divorce. So if you put in there, I want to make $1 million, right? Do you think you're going to wake up the next morning and $1 million is going to be next to your bed?
No.
No, it's not going to work that way. But if you set yourself on a goal, that's the first step. So then you have to do the second A, which is act. You've got to start doing the work for you to be able to have what you want. Okay. For example, it's, say, okay, I want $1 million. How am I going to get it?
Yeah.
What are the steps I'm going to do to make that happen? And put them into action. And it's not just about writing them down. You've got to do some of these things in action.
Yeah.
So that's the second A. And then the third A brings it all together. And when you're working them all together in harmony, you put yourself into a perpetual motion, which is why I call it a cycle of A's, because you're always within the cycle. But this is the most difficult to attain. And that is attitude. You have to have an attitude of detached emotion from the outcome.
Wow.
Very difficult to do that.
Yeah. This is, it's really interesting and really important that you've got the outcome independence in there. And one thing that I think is a huge misconception around the law of attraction is the second stage in the cycle you just said, the action thing. And I think actually something I haven't really thought about that much before, but I was just thinking about when you were talking, is that people can approach everything in life in those two ways that you just shared, right? So they can either be self-conscious or they're self-aware. Self-conscious is where they've been inauthentic for whatever reason. Usually they've got some underlying emotional stuff. I always say that it's just shame, guilt, and trauma, or a cocktail of the three. And when they have that underlying emotional stuff, they're constantly trying to hide from it. So they direct everything outwards, like you said. So they're looking for external validation all the time, or they're outcome dependent instead of independent, etc., etc. The other way to look at life and to approach life is what you were saying about being self-aware, which means, I think, learning to accept ourselves unconditionally and constantly moving towards an evolution of ourselves. So the problem with the law of attraction a lot of the time is that people, they think, because they're approaching it from the first of those 2 points of view, have been self-conscious and therefore externalizing everything, they think that they don't have to do anything. Because normally, I found when I'm coaching people and stuff like that, if people are very much in an ego-driven, shame-driven, self-conscious place, they are resistant to taking action. And so this causes a lot of those kind of people to be attracted to this kind of bullshit, pardon my French, version version of the law of attraction. And the bullshit version is where it tells people, right, all you need to do is kind of close your eyes and, stick your finger in your belly button or something and just think about what you want. And they skip out the action part and they skip out the attitude part. And it becomes a kind of snake oil salesmanship or something like that. And that's why I think a lot of the people misunderstand the law of attraction, because there's so much marketing crap out there that is just aimed at kind of people that are avoidant of action, or they're resistant of themselves because of the ego stuff. What do you think about that?
That's exactly right. It's not like the Wizard of Oz. You can't click your heels 3 times and say there's no place like home.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice. It would be nice if it was like that, but it's
right. It would be. It would be fantastic. Hey, look, I need to lose 30 pounds tomorrow. I'll wake up 30 pounds lighter.
Why do you think so many people have a misconception around the law of attraction and think that it is like that, and then they waste their time, trying to manifest things straight away and kind of getting upset when it doesn't happen? And what's
I think the
that?
first thing is that they don't want to put in the work.
Yeah.
They don't want to do what's necessary to get what they want or what they desire. Because to me, want and desire are different things, and we can touch on that in a minute. But more importantly, they're so beaten down within themselves that they think that nothing could ever happen, that they're already in that mindset of lack that will hold them back. So they go, okay, I asked for it, it didn't happen. It's all a bunch of hooey. A bunch of crap.
Yeah. So what are the main misconceptions that you've seen people have around the law of attraction?
Well, the main one is that if they start doing this law of attraction the right way, and something happens, they go, oh, it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, this is the magic happening.
Mm.
And I'm doing something that's making that happen. So let me figure that out. Or just the opposite. They start asking and acting, and it's not working. And they go, you see, it's not working. That's because the universe is sending you a message that you're not on the right path and that you need to make a course correction. And that's where the attitude part is so important.
Wow. Like what you just said about the course correction is super interesting to me. So the way that I look at life in general is kind of like I just shared a few minutes ago. So people are either filtering everything through their ego in order to hide from their own emotional stuff, or they're dissolving their shame and all of the underlying emotional things that they've got going on by taking action that's going to allow them to become more real and to continuously evolve. And actually, if you look at life through those two ways, in both cases, you'll have some kind of an idea about what your future is going to look like. And because of what's going on inside of you, it'll either be real or unreal as well. So if you're on this path of growing real and evolving and etc, you're more likely to be choosing goals that are real as well. If you're unreal, that's just the language I use. If you're unreal, caught up in your ego, then you're going to choose goals that are actually a way of running away from yourself, even though you might not know that. So for example, maybe you have a lot of underlying shame. You feel like you're not good enough, or you're a people pleaser and all that kind of stuff we were talking about earlier. You will choose goals that actually are an attempt to fill the void within you so that you feel like you can please people. But actually, that's just exacerbating the problem. It's making everything worse. With the law of attraction, the same logic applies, I think. So people might think, right, today I want to manifest, $1 million, whatever it is, so that I can finally feel good about myself. I can fill this void within me, and, mommy and daddy will love me, and whatever it is, all these emotional problems people have. But actually, because that's not real in the first place, it's probably not going to come true. And so there is an element of things will only work out, and this law of attraction will only work if you do the inner work first of finding out what goals are actually real for you and what is authentic and true to life itself or your relationship with life.
Well said, Ali. Well said. And that's where this whole third part comes in. Because if your attitude, if your mindset is, I'm not worth it, then that's what you're sending out there. And that's what the universe and God or whatever else is hearing. Well, you're not worth it because you're inauthentic. You talked about unreal, ingenuine, inauthentic. Same idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you change that mindset to say, I'm open for everything to come to me. And if it doesn't, it's because it's the universe telling me I'm not exactly on the path I'm supposed to be on.
What
right? And make a course correction.
Yeah. It's like we're constantly getting feedback from life. And so actually a big element of this and using this kind of mindset you're talking about successfully is learning to listen to life. Is that something that comes into your philosophy as a whole?
Absolutely. It is, because you've got to see the signs around you and look for the opportunities. And that's another part. It's how you see the world. If you see the world as difficult and problematic, all you'll see are problems. If you see the world as good and opportunistic, you'll see the opportunities. So when they're coming up, you've got to say, oh, wait a minute, here's an opportunity that I could, grasp. I can take hold of, and then decide, how does it serve me and how does it serve anybody around me as well in a positive way?
Do you think there's a kind of emotional feedback as well? So at the most fundamental level, it's about listening to ourselves. I'm always throwing this quote around that we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. So that's kind of
Yep.
what you just said, that, right? So
Exactly.
the thing that distorts our perceptions of the world is our attitude, like you said in your cycle of A's, but it's at a deeper level, our ability to listen to what's going on inside of ourselves. And so you could say, I think, at the most basic level, there are only two emotions. You either feel good or you feel bad. And in general, the things the things that make you feel bad are the consequence of having the unreal attitude that we're talking about, where we're constantly trying to escape life for whatever reason, so the emotional stuff inside of us. And the things that make us feel good are the things that allow us to work through those emotions and to actually value ourselves as we really should be valued when we've been real, because we're all valuable in reality, I think. And so in order to get better results from life itself and from using the law of attraction or whatever people want to call it, the first thing we can do is to start working on our ability to listen to our emotional feedback that we give ourselves, something like that.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And the quote that you said, the world is as we see it, that whole thing,
Yeah.
its origin comes from the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud.
Wow.
So, and it talks about is that whoever you are, what's going on around you is based on your perception.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you perceive the things as, who cares who the president of the United States is? Is it really having a daily effect on your life? Probably not.
No.
But you're going to allow it to have an effect on you, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever. So it's about you getting rid of all of the static around you so that you could focus on it. And here again, it's about focusing without letting the emotions, because every time you let those emotions of, I've got to have it, it's that much further away from you. It's like you always hear, I wasn't looking for a wife, but all of a sudden one appeared.
Yeah. Like the thing you said just there about, all the noise in our lives. Like that's something that I've been really focusing on in my own life recently. I've been calling it like a psychic diet, just cutting out all of this unnecessary negative noise that surrounds us. There's so many distractions everywhere that can, you can just get caught up in these loops and cycles and spirals of just getting bothered about things, like you said, that really don't matter to you all. Like there's the thing with Trump, like they call it Trump derangement syndrome or something. Some people, they just see a picture of Trump on Twitter or something, and that's it for the next 3 hours. Their life has been ruined. It goes to the other side as well with Joe Biden. People see something about how, I don't know, he's done whatever he's done, and they'll get worked up. But actually, none of that stuff matters, and it's just giving us things to think about that we don't want. It's just adding tension, and it's weighing us down from moving forward in that kind of real way you're talking about.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
100%.
So would you say there are kind of lifestyle changes that people can make to, I suppose, get better results from the law of attraction in general?
Absolutely. And, that's a lot of where my course comes in my book, and I just came out with a card deck. So These are some of the things. It's about waking up every morning and setting your intentions correctly.
Wow.
Or today's going to be a great day. I write down three things at least every morning that I'm grateful for.
Yep.
And 3 things at night before I go to bed that I was grateful for that day. And I set my intention right there for the rest of the day. And then I use my own mantra, which is I live incredibly full every day. Now, everybody should find their own mantra. If you want to use mine, great. But whatever it is, that sets you ready for the day.
Wow. Like, actually, this is a really interesting direction to go in, maybe. Like, what is a kind of typical day, let's say, for somebody who is, really living in this way that you're talking about and making the most of themselves and the law of attraction? So you've already said they wake up, they do some gratitude work. How would the day continue from there, would you think? Like in general?
The day continues from there by you looking at everything that's going around you as opportunities.
Wow.
Or times to make somebody smile, to make yourself smile. For example, one of my things is I love to make somebody laugh every day.
Wow.
So I'll be in the supermarket and, waiting online, going to the cash register or something like that. And I'll make the cashier laugh. And when she laughs or he laughs and I say, well, thank you. You go, why? I said, you just filled my quota. I made someone laugh today.
Wow. Yeah. So what you're doing there, you kind of, you're just keeping yourself in the right energetic state, if we want to say that. Like you're keeping yourself very buoyant. So you start the day, you've got intention, so you know what direction you're moving in. Okay, great. But then you're making yourself remember the things you're grateful for. So obviously that's going to raise your emotional feelings from bad to good if you were feeling bad. And then as you go about interacting with people, you're making them laugh, which is one of the most real, authentic interactions you can have with someone. So
right.
Is that ultimately what it's about? Just managing our energy, if we want to call it that, in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, what comes into there is something else I talked about, that I had a very short temper, right? So it used to be something would come my way that was negative or not what I was looking for. And I would immediately go into panic mode and troubleshooting mode. And I've got to fix this and I've got to make it work. And that wasn't working the way I thought it would be working because I'm the control freak. I would get to the point where I would explode like a nuclear reactor because nobody's listening to me. Nobody's doing. Now, when things are coming up that aren't the way I would like them to be, I've learned to respond instead of react. And that's another part of my course, learning how to do that. And I'd love to say it happened overnight, but again, it didn't.
No, you're only a human, though.
Yeah. It's building that muscle memory for your brain, for your emotion.
What causes ultimately what we're talking about, I suppose, here is the attitude thing, right? So all you're sharing really now is this idea that if you've got the right attitude, you can reframe the way you see life so that you're not missing out on what's there. Ultimately, right? So by learning to respond instead of react and training yourself to do that, you're not missing out on the opportunities that are always there. Is that really one of the things that is going to make the law of attraction work? This idea that there's all this opportunity and it's all out there and we can move towards it by taking action, obviously. But the thing that causes us to miss out a lot of the time is just our mental stuff, the blocks that we put in our own path because of the way that we're thinking, basically.
Yes, and it's dismissing the coincidences. Saying, it's just a coincidence or it's a one-off. Instead of saying, you know what? This is because of the work I'm doing on myself. And where will it take me if I allow it to? Because one coincidence, if you knock it off, you go, okay. 2, 3, it starts to add up if you allow it to add up.
Yeah, there's evidence. Eventually, you can't ignore it. Do you think part of the day, this kind of average day for the person who's living in this way, part of the process as well is kind of what you were saying, sort of, about learning not to try and control everything? Because I think that's a really important step in this journey. That, if you're, one of these self-conscious control freaks that a lot of people in the world are because of their emotional stuff, what you'll do is, okay, you read all this self-help stuff and you say to yourself, right, I'm going to become the kind of person who's always taking action. I've got a plan in place and I'm going to stick to this plan rigidly. I know that I want $1 million or whatever it is that you've set as a goal for yourself, and I'm going to do X, Y, Z to get it. But actually, life doesn't work like that, right? We can't control everything. We can't always take the steps that we think we're going to take. There's too many things popping up and happening. And so actually, a lot of the time, a better approach I've found, whether you think you're using the law of attraction or not, is that you know what you want and you have a loose idea of how you might get it, but actually, really, it's not up to you how things unfold. You just know that you're going to keep moving in a certain direction and responding to life as it happens to get there.
That's right. That's right. And that's where you have the right attitude.
Do you think the gratitude thing is a shortcut to a lot of this stuff.
Do I think it's I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
So the gratitude thing, is that something that, if people were just going to focus on one thing to try and improve their ability to use the law of attraction effectively, would working on gratitude be something that would open up all of these other areas we're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. I missed the word you said, so yes, absolutely. What happens is when you put on that attitude of gratitude and you eliminate the complaining by changing the yourself from complaining to appreciating / gratitude, now you're not looking for the reasons for things not to happen and to blame somebody else. Right? You're in that mindset of saying, whatever's happening here is for a reason, and let me be grateful for them to happen. Okay? In almost any situation, you can do that. Even if you're, God forbid, in a car accident, you could say, I could have died. I'm grateful that I didn't die. It's a hard one. It's very difficult. But let's bring it back to an easier level. If you walk around with that mindset of gratitude and you walk into a supermarket, you do your things, and even if you just say thank you, or you let somebody go ahead of you when you're driving because they're trying to inch in, you're being kind, you're putting out the right energy, as we talked about earlier, and it'll come back to you. And a friend of mine wrote a book. It's called The Chesed Boomerang. It's a Jewish book, and Chesed means kindness. And when you put out kindness, it boomerangs back to you tenfold.
Like a big theme that's come up on this podcast in quite a lot of these conversations is that if you can be kind of real with yourself in the way we were talking about, and you do this inner work, and you can get to a place where your emotional stuff isn't holding you back, then you can give more to the world. And if you can give more, that's when things actually start working out, because you receive what you give in a strange, paradoxical way. But most people, because they have an unreal attitude, they're too busy thinking about, what can I get from people in order to feel that I'm filling this void inside myself that's there because I'm being unreal in the first place.
Right. On a very basic level, if you put out negativity and a bad attitude and you don't give to others, right, or you're nasty to somebody, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So they're going to be nasty right back to you.
It's quite simple.
On a very basic level.
Yeah. Like, it's very basic. Like, when you break it down into all these different parts that we've kind of been exploring in this conversation, like, the law of attraction is actually just a very simple thing. It's just that if you have a certain attitude, then you're going to see things in a certain way, and that's going to affect the way that you behave, basically, and that's going to affect what you get back from life. And it's not like, there's a lot of stuff out there that makes it seem way more mystical than it is. And I suppose you could see it like that if you wanted to, but actually it's just basic. What we're talking about really is just being a very basic, real human being who's not hiding from life, I guess, and the way that things work.
Right, exactly right. And it becomes a positive snowball effect.
Because you're making good choices. Ultimately, that is what it's about. It's about making choices that are an extension of the real version of you, and not the unreal, self-conscious, people-pleasing etc. version that we talked about earlier. What do you think are some of the biggest changes? I know you've talked about the lifestyle changes a little bit, but what are the biggest changes that people can make to their attitude to start getting better results in this way that we're talking about? If you were just going to sum that up.
Yeah, so it starts with gratitude and positive thinking and that abundance and looking for opportunities.
It's super amazing, super simple. What would you say to somebody who said, the law of attraction is just, BS. It doesn't work. It's just a marketing gimmick or something like that. What would you say to those kind of people?
I would say, you know what? You're right. Because you don't want to believe in it.
Yeah. Basically, we get what we want, whether we know it or not.
Right.
There's a thing, isn't there? The law of attraction is working whether you know it, whether you know that you're using it or not. It's just because it's so basic, like we were saying. It's whatever you have in your life now is a product of the way you've been thinking in the past. And so
right. Somebody
who doesn't believe in it, well, of course, if they don't believe in it, then they're not going to see the evidence of things working out. And probably, I'm generalizing a lot here, but most people who haven't used this to their advantage will be stuck in the mindset of the self-conscious kind of person we were talking about, who's holding back from life, is judging themselves too much, has all kinds of inner criticism and so on and so forth. And so life becomes an extension of that way of thinking. And of course, they're not going to think that the law of attraction is an actual thing.
That's right.
Wow. Thank you. How does your, the other acronym you shared right at the start of the conversation come into this? So you said you've got the Life Architect's Warrior Code. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, but how does all that feed into this as well? Just to understand your work a bit more.
So what happened was I was going through this changes in my life. And at one point I looked at myself and I wasn't happy where I was. And I realized because I wasn't working on myself in the right way, even though I was a life coach, I wasn't allowing myself to be coached. Wow. So I changed things around. I started working out. I started eating better. I started letting myself being coached. I started reading better. And I lost about 65 pounds along the way, but I also got to that self-awareness state. And one day, I'm ADHD, so imagine a guy ADHD trying to do a 10-minute guided meditation.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not easy for me. But in one of these sessions, I had this download of information that I loved everything that was going on in my life, and I wanted to share it with others. So after I finished meditating, I wrote for 2 hours, and out of it came, I want to show people how they can live their best life. And I came up with the acronym, Live Incredibly Full Every Day. And for me, that's what I strive to do every day. Live incredibly full every day.
Wow. So it sounds like that program or the work you do in that area is around setting foundational kind of mental and physical health habits. Is that right?
Yes.
Wow. So it all feeds into everything, doesn't it? So if you do exercise, like you're saying, and you meditate and all these healthy things that people can do, then you're going to be more likely to accept yourself and who you really are. And then you're more likely after that to believe in a way that's going to allow you to see the world in a way that's kind of open and abundant, and there's opportunities everywhere. And you've got the energy to go out there and interact with people and make them laugh and have a good time and be grateful for everything. It's all simple and it's all very effective. And it's amazing to live in that way if you can. A lot of my work is kind of similar to it, but it works because it's real. That's what I think.
Right, exactly. What happens here is, and this is a great way to encompass what we're talking about, the cycle of A's. You're in that cycle of A's. You're in that perpetual motion of cycle of A's, which then leads you to go further and further and further because you keep pushing yourself because you see the results happening, and you're getting into the mindset of, as long as I do the work and I don't get attached to the outcome, things will continue to develop in a positive way.
Wow. I think that sums it all up very well, like you said it would. We've basically reached our 45-minute deadline, but if you were going to sum all this stuff up, like obviously we jumped around a little bit, that's my tendency, but I think we really did dig into, the law of attraction, how it works, some misconceptions people have. Have you got any final words of wisdom? And would you like to tell people where they can find you and learn more about your work and things as well?
Yeah, well, my final words of wisdom first would be have an attitude of gratitude and don't take anything personally. Yeah. And then you can find me by going very simply to connectwithmartin.com. On there, you can get free gifts like a coloring book for you or kids They're
Wow.
separate, one for kids, one for adults, on an abundant mindset, the warrior mindset. You can find out more about the cycle of A's. You could if you want, you could buy my card deck and have that as well. And my book is about to come out, so you can go there and pre-order it and get the first few chapters. And I have it all in one set, one thing. Just click around, look, and there's even a button for you to click and make an appointment to speak with me.
Brilliant. So I'll share that in the show notes. What is the card deck again? It sounds really interesting. Just a quick version.
The card deck is called the Warrior to Warrior card deck. And what it does, it takes my full course and gives you little snippets about what it's about, just to get an understanding of what you can go. And who knows, it might help somebody just having those cards to say, oh, the cycle of A's, let me remember what they're about. Or so on and so forth, the different things. Self-conscious versus self-aware. Rationalize. Those are cards that are in my deck.
Wow. So that sounds really helpful, especially given all the stuff we've been talking about. It's a good way to remember some of these concepts, which really do work. I've experienced it in my life. Martin, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all this amazing stuff. And, maybe get you on again in the future sometime. But either way, thank you for coming on. Honestly, I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Ali, for your time.